He slowly pulled out the heavy coffin, pried open the wooden lid, and started to take out the small corpse. And at that very moment, out of nowhere, it suddenly started pouring rain. When I had finished the Karaganda school and had just arrived at the Criminal Investigation Department, a major operation was underway to find a notorious necrophile. This was a necrophile who operated in the Tree Valley in Kazakhstan, specifically in the Kurde district, our nearby neighbor. He specifically looked for fresh graves, dug them up, committed a sexual act, and he could disappear, vanish. He went to Russia, earned money there, did something or other, a total drifter. There were many such drifters back then, there are many now too, but then it was a whole class of people who lived like that, right? That was their lifestyle. They wandered around, worked a bit here, earned a bit there, got married somewhere, got something somewhere anyway. That's how they could migrate for years. But in his head, he also had this necrophilia, and periodically he would snap, as he himself told us later. He snaps, he says, just snaps, he just wants it, and that's it, I can't help it, he says. I can't do anything about it. And he goes to the cemetery. And then again, I can go, he says, for 2 or 3 years without wanting anything. He had a wife, by the way. And so when I joined the Criminal Investigation Department back then, for several months, we hung around the cemetery on duty. At night, we were in one village, then in another village. They scattered us 2 or 3 people to a cemetery, and we stood guard waiting for him to come. Well, then he somehow disappeared, and it was all forgotten. By then, I was in a senior role, Chief of the General Staff of the Interior Ministry, of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Kyrgyz Republic. It was still called the Republic of Kyrgyzstan then. It was, not to lie to you, sometime in the 90s, 94, 95, and I was on duty as there was such a position, the officer in charge from the leadership, that is the head of the service unit. I was on duty at night so that if something suddenly happened, I could be on the spot immediately, to report, take some measures, and so on and so forth. And I was already handing over my shift when suddenly a good friend of mine calls, also a graduate of the Karaganda Higher School of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the head of the Kemin District Department of Internal Affairs, Bystrovka. He was the police chief there, and he remembered that I used to be on duty at those cemeteries, you see. He called me and said, "Are you interested in all this?" I said, "Well, I'm from the leadership. What happened? Why didn't you report it? Why didn't you notify anyone?" He says, "We're just working on it right now," he says. "Nothing is clear yet," he says. "We'll report it officially in the evening, but for now, if you want," he says, "it's interesting." And I jumped in the car and rushed there because on one hand, I was truly interested because it was connected to my, so to speak, youthful activities. And secondly, because, well, as the person in charge from management, I needed to know this. Anyway, I rushed all the way to this place called Bystrovka, and then this man, as the Kyrgyz people often say, God truly exists, right? He actually showed up at the cemetery once again. He arrived at the cemetery, and it was late at night with stars above. Just imagine it, no one else was there, it was empty. He arrived and saw a fresh grave. Actually, he had already scouted it out a couple of days before. He was constantly looking for fresh graves. This guy focused almost entirely on the most recent graves he could find. He dug deep into the earth, climbed down inside, pulled out the heavy coffin and opened the lid. He started the process of taking out the body, and at that exact moment, quite suddenly and unexpectedly, out of nowhere, a downpour started. The Almighty saw him, you see. The heavy rain was exactly just as he describes it, like someone was pouring water, pouring bucket after bucket down on me. And he says, while I was moving around, there was clay. And they erected these ancient steles, right? Not a monument, but a small stone with detailed writing inscribed on it.
Yes.
Like, well, it's called a stele, right? It's not a monument yet, a metal one. And it slides down. And it slid over a bit so that right there, there's a little star sitting on top. That little star hit him right in the head. The whole thing, this entire stele struck him, and he lost consciousness.
Yeah.
And collapsed onto the ground right there. And the watchman came. He'd been wandering around aimlessly somewhere. He came and saw it, and he called immediately, rushed off urgently, shouting and all that. There were no cell phones back then and no phones at the cemetery either. He found one somewhere, someone lived nearby. Anyway, he called, a squad arrived, and he's still lying there. And when they pulled him out of there, that's when he told how it all happened. And later on, I even have photos with him. We, as they say, took him around to all the sites. In short, he eventually confessed to 26 episodes, 26 separate episodes, this necrophile. He confessed, showed how he did it, remembered. I think there were actually many more, but not in our area. He was probably also in Kazakhstan, doing this possibly in Russia too, but we inquired, we sent out alerts, and people would come, and imagine it's a double blow. And this fact, the sexual contact, and also, and that's why it was a horror, it was an epidemic, everyone was very afraid then. Well, this continued, consider, I started in 78, and this was, well, almost 20 years. And how much before that? Until the 70s, before I arrived. How many years? In short, it went on for about 30 years. And so, after the trial, he was convicted and found to be completely sane, and then given, I believe, a sentence of 13 years of imprisonment. They gave him 13 years in prison, and as soon as he actually arrived at the detention center, he tragically hanged himself on literally the third or fourth day. I see. This happened because other inmates really don't like people like that, especially those who have been convicted of such terrible sexual crimes.